Elvis graduates from the academy but considers himself incompatible with modern society. There's only one thing left he can do: become a helpless leech-neat to society. 2 years later, his sister, Alyssa, suddenly barges into his room and kicks him out of the house. Elvis resides in the imperial capital of the Great Empire, a multi-walled city where travelers flock from all over. Everything here is top class, from the education, swordsmanship, as well as the adventurers and merchants guilds. They are highly advanced in several areas of higher research, making living here highly sought after by academics and scholars. Elvis kindly asks his sister why she's kicking him out of the house, pointing out that he'd die if she did something like that. She'll only rescind his expulsion on the condition that he gets off the couch and find work. Elvis says he'll do it if he feels like it, and Alyssa offers to make him feel like it. It doesn't take a college graduate to notice that Alyssa is furious. Elvis doesn't blame her, as he is very self-aware about how useless he is. While Alyssa forces Elvis onto the sofa so they can have a serious talk, he wonders how he got into this situation in the first place. Elvis graduated from the top of his class at the prestigious Forsenberg Academy, but after some introspection, Elvis was unable to find employment anywhere. Had his parents been still alive, he would have been more proactive in finding one. However, ever since he was a child, Elvis had no ambition to speak of. There was nothing in particular he wanted to do, but he was a natural prodigy, capable in nearly every single aspect of academic and extracurricular life. As such, he was viewed as a prodigy, and lofty goals and expectations were suddenly dropped on his shoulders. However, Elvis doesn't have it in him to put effort into anything else. He claims to lack the essential component of working hard, gambling. He simply wants to live a laid-back life. Being a wage slave is the opposite of what he wants to do. Whenever Elvis received his report card, he received glowing academic honors, but he was criticized for his antisocial and uncooperative behavior. Judging that he'd be a poor fit for society, Elvis decided to become a NEET. He's lived like this for 2 years, but the consequences of his actions are now catching up to him. He asks Alyssa an extremely obvious question: "Are you mad?" Alyssa replies that she isn't mad at all, which is a barefaced lie. Elvis and Alyssa are half-siblings, so Elvis knows just how furious she is. Alyssa is the exact opposite of Elvis, a serious, hardworking individual and a peerless beauty to boot. After she graduated, she started working instead of pursuing higher education to support their family. Elvis, on the other hand, is more useless than a white crayon. Elvis tries to defuse the situation by showing her a funny novel he was reading, but Alyssa is putting her foot down. She's not going to back down this time. Alyssa tells Elvis that it's about time he started working, but he repeats his earlier explanation of not having enough gambrin in his body and remarking that it all went to her. Alyssa grips Elvis' shoulder and makes it clear that she isn't messing around anymore. Elvis realizes this now. They take their seats opposite each other on the dining table. Alyssa addresses him with an honorific, which is a sudden punch in the guy for Elvis. He pushed his sister so far into the corner that she's using honorific, while she tries to tell him that he can find a job if he puts his mind to it. Elvis abruptly agrees to find work. Alyssa is stunned. She didn't think it'd be that easy, and Elvis doesn't seem like he's joking either. She accuses him of this being some kind of trick, but Elvis is dead serious. He doesn't want to trouble Alyssa more than he already has. That was the fastest change of heart the world has ever seen. Alyssa starts crying tears of joy at the fact that her brother won't be useless anymore. Elvis resolves to set his mind to seriously working, but he doesn't know what kind of job he'll get. Alyssa tells him that, with his track record, he'll be able to get any job he wants. He is still a prodigy. However, Elvis would rather not talk about his academic record with his sister. It's a common saying that grades don't define everything about you, and that the world is a very different and hostile place. Instead, he decides not to search for a job based on his ability alone, since he doesn't want to work hard to begin with. Alyssa wishes that he wouldn't overanalyze himself like that. Elvis proudly says that he's a very useless person, and that she of all people should know that. He sets out a few non-negotiables about the kind of job he'll find, but as he thinks about it more seriously, he realizes that he'll end up not working at all. He considers just working from home somehow, but Alyssa suddenly tells him that she has the perfect job for him, and she holds up a flyer for adventurer recruitment. Elvis thinks that it isn't a bad idea. He was at the top of his class during swordsmanship and magic lessons, and his fighting instincts aren't bad either. However, he believes that the job must be somehow troublesome, but Alyssa tempts him with the fact that adventurers are self-employed and can work whenever they want. Elvis likes the sound of that. He can earn just enough money to survive for a year, and then just lays around whenever he doesn't need to. Elvis finally finds the motivation to work, but Alyssa warns him that there'll be plenty of applicants competing for the same spot. Elvis almost immediately gives up, but Alyssa drags him back up again. Elvis can hit 2 birds with 1 stone. He'll be able to earn money, and his sister will be able to brag that her brother is an adventurer for one of the top guilds in the country. He'll be able to turn around his useless life in one go. Even if things don't work out, at least the man tried. Elvis decides to go ahead and take the interview the very next day, but he has another problem aside from the exams. His clothes suck. Alyssa takes Elvis out for some last-minute shopping, and right after, they head straight to the recruitment test of one of the top adventurer guilds, Black Dragon Fang, winner of the coolest and edgiest guild named 10 years running. Everyone is eager to make a name for themselves, which makes Elvis feel a little out of place. One of the receptionists calls their attention to fill out their application forms and submit them to the counter right after. Elvis dutifully fills out the forms but gets stuck when he comes across a question asking him what his profession is. He knows that it'd be bad if he just put NEET, but even worse if he just writes down some random nonsense. He brings his form to the counter, and the receptionist begins to read it over. As expected, she becomes distressed when she discovers Elvis really wrote NEET on his profession form. She tells him to write adventurer since she assumes that he was one in the past, but Elvis is a NEET through and through. He refuses to compromise. He's just a regular jobless NEET. The receptionist informs him that their guild doesn't consider people with no experience for hiring. Elvis wants to leave right away, but he knows a fate worse than death awaits him at home if he returns empty-handed. Elvis brings out the flyer from earlier and points out that it said that the guild was open and friendly to even newcomers. This means that she has no right to turn away people like him with no experience. The receptionist is in distress, but it's because she knows he's right. Elvis apologizes for troubling her, but he has reasons as to why he can't back down here. Ericet is forcing him to. Phonic, one of the guild's adventurers famous for his nickname, the Meteor Swordsman, asks what all the trouble is about. Elvis has no idea who he is, and the receptionist politely informs him. Phonic approaches Elvis and tells him to give up on the recruitment exam for his sake. He wholeheartedly believes that Elvis doesn't have what it takes. It's impossible for a no-name NEET like him to even attempt. Elvis looks him straight in the eye and asserts that his resolve is rock solid. He'll take the exam no matter what, because his sister is forcing him to. There is no greater force on earth. Phonic is impressed by Elvis's misplaced bravery, but he wonders if he'll have the same bravado once he sees him in action. Phonic asks Elvis if he'll have the same resolve once he sees his slash in the flesh. The whole crowd erupts in cheers and excitement at the chance to see Phonic's famous meteor sword firsthand. Elvis wonders if he's offended Phonic somehow. Phonic draws his sword to show Elvis the difference between their strengths, in the hopes that Elvis will turn tail and go home. Elvis braces himself for Phonic's slash. The attack comes, but the speed is even slower than Elvis thought it would be. He forgot that he was quite the unrivaled swordsman himself back in school, but he reminds himself that kids playing with swords and professional adults are two completely different ballgames. To top it off, Phonic is a respected and feared swordsman in the guild. Elvis doesn't consider himself a match for him at all, but he can still tell that Phonic's slash won't hit him at all. Elvis stands completely still as Phonic's sword whizzes past mere inches away from his face. Phonic's eyes narrow. He can tell that Elvis wasn't fazed at all. In fact, he remained perfectly calm all throughout that brief attack. Elvis intentionally made sure his sword wouldn't hit, and he tells the bystanders as such. However, the fact remains that Elvis was able to see through his meteor sword, which is a feat in and of itself. While the crowd goes wild, Phonic approaches Elvis so he can confirm that it wasn't that he couldn't move, but that he did move. When Elvis confirms that the latter is what happened, Phonic laughs. Elvis was better than he thought. Phonic personally approves of Elvis taking the entrance exam, but he makes himself Elvis's opponent during the swordsmanship test, partly out of respect but also to see if what Elvis did just now was a fluke or a true display of skill. Elvis connects the dots about what Phonic just did. He really was a nice guy underneath all that trash talk. The receptionist hesitatingly gives Elvis his exam number, which is his first step into finding employment, so that his sister won't kick him out of the house. Elvis, along with other Black Dragonfang hopefuls, are ushered into another room to meet the guild master, or Frito. Even someone as disconnected with reality as Elvis knows who he is. He is an unmatched monster and the pinnacle of fighting ability, famed for being masterfully adept at every form of combat. Orfrito gives a speech about the guild's long history and pedigree. To prove it, he has the third princess of Emperor Zoros, Lady Flare, waiting in the wings to observe the moment the new Black Dragonfang members are chosen. They will be under close observation by the royal family. Their clan is the largest in the capital, and they do not hesitate to recruit those with power. Orfrito wants to see if they are worthy of being in their ranks. The whole crowd explodes into a sea of cheers, which is not what Elvis wanted. It's a tough environment for an introverted, antisocial creature like Elvis. The examinees are quickly herded into separate rooms for the first phase of the exam, and as luck would have it, Elvis ends up in Phonic's group. Right now, there are two things on Elvis's mind: that there are a lot of people here, and he wonders what time he can go home. Phonic quickly goes through the examinees one by one to test their skill in swordsmanship, but none are barely able to make him break a sweat. Elvis remarks that Phonic's epithet as the Meteor Sword isn't just for show. The world is bigger than he thought, and he fully expects to be defeated in a timely manner, like his peers. Elvis is next up on stage, and he is handed a practice sword by one of the assistants. Phonic has been eagerly waiting to meet Elvis again, even though they just met like half an hour ago. Phonic clarifies what Elvis already knows, that he was just holding back at the reception hall earlier. This time is different. The Meteor Sword of the Black Dragon Fang will give it his 100%. Phonic reassures Elvis that they're both using the same dull-edged swords. While the swords won't be able to take a life, they'll still hurt like hell. Elvis asks Phonic to go easy on him. No, really. Without further ado, Phonic charges into Elvis, fully intending to finish him off just as quickly as he did with the others. Elvis closes his eyes and calmly focuses. When he opens them, he evades Phonic's opening attack, but the Meteor Swordsman doesn't let up. He relentlessly unleashes a barrage of blows, but Elvis manages to dodge every single one, right in full view of a crowd of examinees and the big boss, Orfrito. Phonic is confused as to why he can't land a single hit, so he decides to throw away his pride and bet it all on his trump card, the Meteor Sword. That's just what Elvis was waiting for. Phonic brings his sword down at the fastest speed he can, and unlike before, Elvis runs into it. Using the brief opening presented to him, Elvis rams his blunt sword into Phonic's stomach and sends him flying into the wall, severely damaging it. The crowd goes nuts. Medics rush to make sure Phonic is okay, and Elvis silently thanks him. He mistakenly believes that Phonic went easy on him again, not knowing that the man was really desperate to land a single hit. Thanks to what he thinks is Phonic's generosity, Elvis is one step closer to what every 20-year-old dreams of: steady employment. Alyssa won't be able to kick him out of the house at this rate. However, when an announcer calls for those who entered the magic test to assemble, Elvis remembers that he still has a few hurdles left to overcome. He half regrets entering both, since he only really needed one to prove that he was a capable fighter. He considers canceling the test at the last moment, but he knows that if his sister found out, he'd never hear the end of it. He reluctantly decides to just get it over with. Elvis observes as rows of mage adventurer hopefuls cast the basic spell, Magic Arrow, at an array of target rings. He walks up to one of the examiners, who directs him to one of the open target ranges. All Elvis has to do is fire 3 magic arrows at the target. Elvis asks how their spells will be rated, and the examiner explains that their target rings are special, as they are coated with a special magical spell that calculates how powerful their attacks are. Elvis finds this really convenient. As he swipes his exam card onto the console, he has a sudden realization. He asks the examiner how strong the targets are, remembering that he often blew up the practice targets back in school. If he accidentally broke the targets and had to pay for them, his sister would kill him. The examiner tells him not to worry, pointing to one of the mages in the back. A protective spell over the target rings is guaranteed to take whatever a beginner adventurer can throw at it. With that in mind, Elvis decides not to hold back. His magic arrow completely erases the target ring from existence. He forgets that he isn't a beginner adventurer. That wasn't supposed to happen. The examiner makes sure that Elvis was the one who fired that magic arrow attack because he wants to understand why the target broke. This is precisely why Elvis asked about the target's defenses. The examiner concludes that the magic field around the target was likely depleted, so he asks Elvis to test it on another target. Elvis reminds himself that the goal is to just hit the target, not destroy it off the face of the earth like his younger self would have done. He doesn't want to be known as a guy who can't control his magic either. Elvis carefully dials back his destructive power, but it's still not enough. The second target is also annihilated, which complicates things even further. While hitting the target earns a point, Elvis wonders if breaking it results in a disqualification. The examiner dismisses Elvis, but he begs for one last chance to finally get it right. Carmilla, one of the expert mages in Black Dragon Fang, walks over to see what the problem is. The examiner explains the situation and how no magic arrow could possibly be strong enough to destroy a magically enhanced target. Because this can't possibly be right, he wants to end the exam early, but Elvis insists on being given a third chance to prove himself. Carmilla walks up to Elvis, intrigued that someone was able to penetrate her magical barrier. The examiner volunteers to escort him out right this instant, but Carmilla surprisingly takes Elvis's side, and she pushes for him to be given another chance. It's just one more shot, so she doesn't mind. The examiner worries that they may lose a third magic target, so Carmilla volunteers to act as the fourth target. Elvis worries that his magic arrow may hurt her, but Carmilla is insulted at the mere notion that a mere magic arrow spell could ever hope to damage her. She casts a protective barrier spell around herself, and she invites Elvis to give it all he's got. Elvis breathes a huge sigh of relief. Now he has another chance to prove himself. While his earlier exam with Phonics was to display his true power, Elvis is careful to fire his magic bolt at the required power level. Elvis weakens his magic arrow to the weakest possible level in the hopes that it will be enough, and he fires it. Elvis's magic arrow shatters Carmilla's magic barrier and inflicts a massive amount of damage. The examiners rush to her to make sure she's okay, and Elvis despairs that he wasn't able to control his power. He's afraid that he'll be disqualified for sure. To his surprise, Carmilla stands back up as if nothing happened. She's in extreme pain, but she's impressed nonetheless that Elvis was able to penetrate her barrier. However, Elvis' magic arrow was still way too powerful. He fully expects to be slapped with a massive point deduction for his failure to control his magic, and when Carmilla asks him for his exam number, he's sure that she intends to expel him from the exams completely. Elvis solemnly gives his exam number of 378, fully acknowledging that his own immaturity led to this situation. Carmilla leans in closely and tells Elvis that she'll take a deep look into his application. Elvis misinterprets this as Carmilla threatening to get back at him sometime in the future. Elvis may be a prodigy, but a rock could read social cues better than he can. Elvis assumes that this is the end of his examination run, so he thanks Carmilla for her consideration and leaves. He wonders what Alyssa will do when she finds out that he nearly killed his examiner. Either way, he consoles himself with the fact that not everyone gets into Black Dragon Fang to begin with, but it seems like Carmilla has other ideas. While Elvis heads home wondering how to break the news to Alyssa, the selection committee of the Black Dragon Fang is fervently discussing who to recruit from among their hundreds of hopefuls. Phonic meets with Kyle, a fellow examiner, who seems excited about this year's selection exam. It's his first time being this pumped up about it, and the reason is, without a doubt, their mysterious examinee, number 378. The entire room is in an uproar over him, so Kyle asks Phonic if he went easy on him during the exam. Phonic looks away out of a mix of embarrassment and shame and replies that he was serious. Carmilla struts into the room and quickly walks over to Kyle and Phonics so she can get a glimpse of Eldas's application form. Kyle asks about her arm injury, and she impatiently says that she'll be fine. She was hit by one of the strongest spells she's experienced in years. It's been a long time since her recovery spells alone weren't enough to bring her back to full health. However, as she looks over Eldas's application form, she becomes confused to see that he listed NEET under his past profession. Phonic asks Carmilla what she thinks about Elvis, but aside from the fact that he's the king of rock and roll, what she thinks is self-explanatory. There's no way they'll let such talent slip away from their fingers. A few days later, the Black Dragon Fang posts announce those who passed their examinations. Elvis, as expected, does not see his examinee number on the board. Dejected, he starts walking home, agonizing over the wasted chance that Phonic gave him. He isn't looking forward to the beating he'll get from Alyssa either. However, to his surprise, a cloaked Phonic grabs Elvis and asks to speak to him in private. Elvis wonders what Phonic has to say, and he assumes that it was about his missteps and blunders during the exams, despite the extra bits of help that he received. Instead, Phonic apologizes to Elvis for failing to protect him. Elvis is confused. Phonic says these words with a heavy heart. He knows that Elvis deserved to pass. During the selection proceedings, Orfredo rejects Elvis's application on the basis of fraud. Phonic raises his voice, but being careful not to offend Alfredo, he words his next sentences carefully. He asks why they are letting such an obviously talented individual like Elvis slip away, and Orfredo explains that he is concerned about appearances. 2 of their 8 best members, Phonic and Carmilla, were easily beaten by an unknown newcomer. Such a thing should never exist, and such news should never come to light. He reminds them all that Princess Flare was watching the exams as a representative of the royal family, the same royal family that trusts in them as the greatest fighting force in the capital. The fact that 2 of them were defeated so pitifully is something that shouldn't have happened. To cover up their defeats, Orfredo simply told Lady Flare that Elvis was a fraud somehow. Phonic grits his teeth. Eldas's strength was real. He tries to protest Alfredo's decision, but he is forced to stay silent when Orfredo threatens to strip him of his 8-star position. This position is only given to the clan's 8 strongest members, and Orfredo asks him if he's willing to give up that seat to Elvis. Could anyone ever give up such a prestigious seat? Faced with such an unfair ultimatum, Phonic is unable to say anything in response. Phonic withdrew in shame, and he apologizes to Elvis now for being unable to do anything. Elvis thanks Phonic. The thought alone of apologizing to him is enough, and this is also a learning experience for a NEET like him. Phonic asks Elvis if he's forgiven them for making such a controversial decision, and Elvis says that he has. Phonic's respect for Elvis grows. He truly is a remarkable man, and he hopes to meet him again someday. After shaking hands, Phonic sinks back into the crowd. Elvis thinks that Phonic is a really, really great guy. It was thanks to Phonic that Elvis got as far as he did, and even though Elvis failed in the end, it was Phonic who apologized to him. However, now he has to face the music. He has to explain to Alyssa that he failed to get in. He expects Alyssa to not be back until sundown because of work, but to his surprise, Alyssa is waiting for him at home. Elvis flinches back and asks what she's doing here, and she replies that she was so excited to hear about his exam results that she couldn't work properly. Elvis immediately admits that he failed the exam, but Alyssa takes the news surprisingly well. It doesn't matter to her that he failed. What matters to her is that Elvis got up and tried. The fact that Elvis is actively trying to change his lifestyle is more than she can ask for. He's finally moving. Elvis realizes that Alyssa wasn't waiting for him, not because she was worried about whether or not he passed, but because she wanted to be there for him in case he failed. Elvis thanks Alyssa for her thoughtfulness, but she drops the bomb that he might actually be lucky that he failed. When he asks her to elaborate, she explains that he isn't a good fit for the Black Dragon Fang at all. Since it's the largest adventurers guild in the capital, there's a lot of work, and overtime is extremely common. There are nearly 200,000 words in the English language, but there isn't a combination of them to express just how glad Elvis is that he failed. Alyssa just wanted him to take the exam as a little test. He asks her how he knows about this, and she explains that it's all because of an acquaintance of hers from the Adventurers Guild. Elvis refrained from talking about jobs so much that he didn't even know that. Elvis worries that this means he isn't cut out to be an adventurer, but Alyssa thinks otherwise. She just doesn't think he's a good fit for the Black Dragon Fangs. She doesn't blame him for failing since there were a lot of extraordinary examinees this time, and the fact that he defeated one of the 8-star members is a lot to brag about. Elvis didn't even know that he did that. Elvis sinks into the sofa, and Alyssa encourages him to work even harder in the future. When Elvis was a kid, he knew nothing but victory. He was always at the top, so he's never experienced what it's like to look up to someone. Elvis shudders with excitement. What if he could be one of those 8 stars? Alyssa suggests that he can become a free adventurer with no affiliation. The thought never crossed Elvis's mind before. It certainly gives him the degree of freedom that he craves. Alyssa jumps on top of his lap and congratulates him on taking the first step to breaking out of his neathood. A week later, Alyssa kicks him out of the house and will only allow him to go back inside if he does some freelance work. His rest was sadly short-lived.